this has to be one of the better fights on the card, just in terms of fan favorites and guys you kind of keep your eye on every time you see them fight. Ronnie Lawrence is that exciting style of wrestler that everybody falls in love with, right? That boring style where there's not much movement, things like that. I think it's that kung fu background. His striking's pretty good. He's got good gravity and good, speed, movement, all that little fun stuff. He just moves so well, and it makes him such an active ground fighter, whether it's ground and pound, getting dominant position. He just always seems to be in the right place at the right time. But the interesting thing about him is that he kind of takes damage, right? We've seen him a bit cut up in the previous fights, despite being so dominant. You talk about how many takedowns he's able to land. The Dana White Contender Series was absolutely beautiful, but I actually want to talk about his debut, where he landed 8 of 9 takedowns with 77 of 121 significant strikes before finishing in the third. That was a really tough fight for both guys. I think that there was damage being done, but it was all about resilience and finding those ways to win, and that's exactly what Ronnie seems to do. The cardio is there. He seems to be able to go for days, and I think that's where the pace of this fight's just so interesting to me, right? You talk about a guy like Trevin, and I think that Trevin Jones is probably one of the faster growing names for the diehards because of just all of the things that's happened to him in such a short period of time. He had such an opportunity to grow his stock during the pandemic, and the Timur Valiev fight, where everybody was kind of writing him off and just riding Timur Valiev till the sunset. The guy looked beautiful, and he finished him, caught him so off guard with a beautiful strike, and won that fight via finish. And then we all know that he was basically overturned there for a little bit of the marijuana. And now, after that, making a huge splash, making up for it in a big way, the Mario Bautista fight. Now, Mario Bautista has 2 losses, and the only other one is to Corey Sandhagen. So it really puts in perspective how good of a fighter that Trevin Jones really is. I think in that fight, you noticed how much power he really packs, and the fact that he was able to finish it later in the fight tells you that the power carries. He's never been finished via strikes. He got finished via rear naked choke back in the day, but all 3 of his losses since then are splits. So you really have to put all of that perspective. You might not have to go watch all of the tapes of these fights, but you think about the kind of guy that Trevin Jones has been in his fights. He's been fighting in Russia before making his run back in the UFC, and I think that's where I'm really excited to see what he can do now that he seems to be taking things a bit more in stride and having fun and obviously avoiding the things that might, make him overturn some of the fights. But you really have to appreciate the things he's done. Very exciting. And, I think in this fight, when you talk about the power, keeping the distance, the most fun part about this fight that I think no one's going to be talking about is that Trevin Jones is a black belt in BJJ, and he actually loves grappling. It just so happens that we have to watch him strike so much because he just has fun doing it. But if Ronnie's able to get these takedowns and get top position, it's going to be very, very fun to watch just how good Trevin Jones' BJJ is, whether it's to lock up submissions, get himself back to the feet, or even just get that time back into defense where he can either work himself back into a striking position or even more so work in some of his own groundwork. How fun would it be to watch these 2 guys roll like absolute madmen in 3 rounds of fighting without, even landing that many strikes? It would blow you away because you wouldn't think it'd go that way. But that's an area that it could very much land on with how much Ronnie's going to look for those takedowns. I really think that Trevin Jones is bringing way, way, way more power than any previous fighter that Ronnie's ever seen. And that's going to make Ronnie a bit more responsible, hopefully. But you want to talk about having that kung fu background. Trevin Jones has actually had some issues with body kicks in his past 2 fights. We saw Timur do a pretty good job of that, and so did Mario Bautista. So if those are the areas where you're finding that there's some success to have, I think that that's where Ronnie's striking game needs to be focused. Leg kicks, body kicks, slow him down, take that power away. All of a sudden, he's a bit lighter on the feet, so you can work those takedowns in and start to work that ground and pound. And especially if he's a little beat up and tired, he's not going to be able to maneuver so well from the bottom position. And on the flip side, you got Trevin Jones, who just wants to keep the distance, keep landing those big, powerful shots. And you talk about just being a guy from Guam like my boy Rock Martinez. I mean, he really is putting on an absolute show. And outside of those body kicks, I'm just looking at my notes here, not seeing too many things that I've written down just in terms of areas that you really have to worry for him. But, I think that he's going to bring it. And his cardio seems to hold up if he needs it to towards the later parts of the fights, especially when he's trying to catch guys like crazy. So wrestling versus striker with that, X factor of BJJ kind of sprinkled in. For me, I'm just interested in this fight to see where the lines are, because it's going to maybe help me figure out where I just want to side money wise. But outside of that, do I really care to bet on this fight? Probably not. I think that I'm going to hinge a bit personally towards Trevin Jones, because I think he has what it takes to kind of upset a guy like Ronnie Lawrence. So with that said, I'm going to say that Vegas is favoriting Ronnie Lawrence in a big way. I actually want to give him a line of about minus 180 to minus 200. I think that he should be the favorite just based on what everybody thinks of him. Dana White used to talk his head off about him. And so without further ado, let's take a look. There it is, man. Minus 180, about minus 180 opener. Moved very much down to that minus 134, minus 140. Man, I truly believe that there's some value on Trevin Jones here, even at that plus 120, plus 125 mark if you get it. Plus 155, I mean, that's a big number for Trevin Jones, and I think that's a fun one to lay. I think that the under in this fight is an option, just based on how much that power translates over 4 rounds. But at the same time, Ronnie's an animal, and unless you're getting juice lines to take a sprinkle, similar to what I did with that Minner Elkins fight, I mean, that was an absolute beauty. Let's not get into that, but I think that this is a fun fight. The lines are suggesting that the fight's getting a lot more close than people think, and I think that's rightfully so. I think that Vegas made the right call by opening for Ronnie Lawrence, but like I said, a lot of us MMA fans and pundits alike are very much in tune with where Trevin Jones' game is, despite some of the bad decision-making earlier in his career. Now he doesn't have to worry about it. So I'm calling fight of the night, at least for myself. Probably going to be tougher to get into the next fights, but we're going to do it, and we're going to have fun doing it.